Hello, SMM5 here, and today I'm going to do something I probably should have done a long time ago. Today I'm going to tell you all what I think it takes to be a great critic of the SMG4 show. I have been a critic of this show for over a year. I made my first critique video in early 2023, and I actually started reviewing SMG4 on DeviantArt in December of 2022. So I believe that I am at least experienced enough to be making this video. To be clear, nobody's saying you are required to be a certain way in order to give good feedback, nor am I attempting to act like a know-it-all. But a lot of critics I see in the SMG4 community lack some essential things that I think are needed to give good feedback to SMG4, which can result in bad feedback that could negatively impact the show. I don't know about you, but I for one would prefer that the community voice has as positive of an impact on the show and creators as possible. Today I am going to be explaining what I think makes for a good SMG4 critic, and the kind of integrity I would like to see from fellow critics in the future. Also, I will be bringing up some examples from other critics as an example of bad feedback or bad aspects of a review, so I do apologize in advance if this offends anybody, be they the critics in reference or anyone who may agree with them. All I request is that if you take umbrage with anything I say, be civil and discuss it with me in the comments. Without further ado, let's get into it. A couple of months ago, I made a post criticizing a review of the mustache video on the SMG4 subreddit. One of my issues with this review is that it's unconstructive and it doesn't do a good job criticizing the episode at all. It offers nothing of value other than that it confirms the biases of people who also dislike Mr. Puzzles and arc-related stuff in general, which is probably why it has as many upvotes as it does. It's a good example of how not to write a review. The most important thing any critic should do in their critiques, at least in my opinion, is to be as constructive as possible in your feedback. The point of a critique is to let the people working on the show know what does work, what doesn't work, and how they can improve upon their art in the future. In which case, it is important to make it clear what the issue with what you are criticizing is. The mindset I typically go into when reviewing something is as follows. If someone like, say, Medi Excalibur, were to watch my review, I would want them to gain something from what I'm saying. I want them to understand where I'm coming from, what my issue or praise is, to know what I think they're doing right and wrong, and how I think they could improve upon their art as time goes on. If Medi saw the review I brought up earlier, he wouldn't have gained anything of value aside from the fact that some people don't like Mr. Puzzles. This is why I really like my Swins videos. Because it is through this format where I am best able to point out exactly what I do and do not like about the video in question, even the really small stuff that I probably wouldn't mention in my R&Rs, while also presenting it in a way that is fun. It is important that SMG4 gets the right feedback, otherwise they could make unnecessary changes that impact the show in a negative way. In 2019, people complained that SMG4 was focusing a lot on plot and story after the anime arc. And in 2022, they complained that the Revelations arc, which holds one of the best developed character arcs in SMG4, was too boring. And as a result, we have to deal with underdeveloped arcs, underdeveloped character developments, inconsistent character developments, an uncanny amount of unresolved plot points not getting the attention they deserve, and the crew generally not putting enough focus and effort into the quality of the story like they did in 2019 and Revelations. And perhaps if people didn't only complain that the newer characters were boring, and they had also given proper feedback that may help make them more interesting, we'd see more done with them like in 2020 and 2021, and not be stuck with main duo or trio episodes for the vast majority of the time. It's not that you're required to speculate ideas for SMG4, but it wouldn't hurt to provide alternatives and express what you would have liked to see instead. I also think it's important to give recommendations on how the show can be improved upon. I know that the internet's definition of feedback essentially boils down to expressing a hell ton of hate in the hopes that whoever seeing it knows what not to do. I mean, this community alone has a whole Reddit space dedicated to just that. But it's also important to provide ideas for how what's being criticized could have been better, and what to keep in mind for the future. For example, when it comes to complaining about the Puzzle Vision movie, most of the criticisms I see are exactly that. Telling SMG4 what they should not have done. Fair enough, Mr. Puzzles did not need to go out like Team Rocket. But when they complain about how we didn't get enough Mr. Puzzles backstory and how anticlimactic Mr. Puzzles' defeat was, I rarely if ever see anyone talking about what they would have done differently or what SMG4 actually should have done to implement that into their story. I mean, I know what I would have liked. My version of this movie's ending is basically the final battle in Minecraft Story Mode Season 2. But I'm not the majority of people talking about this movie, and it's not really clear to me what they would have wanted instead. If SMG4 knows how to be a better show, then they'll have higher quality content. So as a critic, it is your job to make it clear what can be improved upon, and how one may improve upon it. That is why being constructive with your criticisms and feedback is important. When being a critic of a show or anything you like, an important thing to do is figure out what you want from the show, what you don't want, and to have a good level of consistency with your standards while critiquing what you want to improve. Otherwise, it's difficult for whoever's reading or watching to know what you actually want or how they can actually improve upon their art. If I had to describe my standards for SMG4 videos, it would be as follows. If a video is entertaining and makes me laugh enough, while also not doing anything massively bad that actually ticks me off, then it's a solid video. And if a video does something interesting, or something that addresses a complaint I have, like using an underused character or following up on a plot point I've been wanting to see more from for a while now, then I am definitely going to give credit where credit is due. There is obviously more to my standards than that, but that is essentially where I'm coming from for the most part when I review SMG4 videos. If your standards are not consistent, it can be difficult to let the creators know what you actually want from show and how they can best improve. A good example of this is Mr. Puzzles. A lot of fans really don't like the character because he's overused, and that they're milking him, and that he should have just been killed off and never to return after the Puzzle Vision movie. But didn't we also complain that the movie was a bad ending for him? That it was anticlimactic and we didn't get enough of a look into his backstory? Clearly the way he's been used after the movie was to explore his character after spending a year building him up, which one would think is SMG4 attempting to remedy that problem. But I guess that's not what the people who complain about that have to say, is it? Additionally, it is also universally agreed upon that Dati's death and emotional impact in the anime arc were bad because they didn't use her enough prior, something I agree with wholeheartedly. However, when I say that, I also don't mind Mr. Puzzles having a lot of screen time this year. He had a bad ending in the movie and it's good that they're keeping a relevant character. Well, relevant. When there is more than can be done with this character as opposed to an unsatisfactory ending in the movie. So why are we complaining about Mr. Puzzles having as much plot and relevance as he does when they are clearly dodging the mistake they made with Desti? Does this mean that we now think Desti was actually handled well? You know, because we're complaining about Mr. Puzzles, the big bad of this year whose character the SMG4 show has been exploring after a year of build-up, is being milked, and we want him to not appear so much? I even saw some people saying they should essentially do that too, so that's not even out of the question at this point. So on one hand, SMG4 can't just ignore story-relevant characters because it doesn't justify their existence and emotional impact in the arc. But on the other hand, they also can't make a character who is relevant to the story stay a relevant character because they're milking him. I don't know about you, but if I'm one of the editors at SMG4, I'm having a really hard time figuring out what these people want. It is important that you always make an effort to make sure that you're not being unreasonable, and that you are letting whoever is watching know what you do and do not want from the SMG4 show. I'm not saying you have to follow some kind of rule book you made for yourself, but it is important to make it most clear what you want from the show when critiquing it. The dictionary defines bias as a prejudice in favor or against one thing, person, or group compared to another, usually in a way that is considered unfair. This means that the moment we take a liking or a disliking to something, a bias is formed. And that is okay, as that is the case with any typical human being and is a part of basic psychology. However, in consequence to criticizing or praising something under the integrity of a critic, it is important to set whatever bias you have aside for the sake of a proper and fair review. You may think that contradicts my previous point, that you should have your standards set straight so you don't come across as unreasonable and fumble your points, but it actually doesn't. In fact, it is actually what makes your standards more flexible, and allows you to keep a more open mind to a video you are critiquing. If you walk into a video with a closed mind, you are allowing your biases to affect your experience, and that may have a negatively impact your review and analysis. You may come into a video with a certain title and expect to hate it, which, if your bias is not set aside, may make you think of the video worse than you would if you had come in open-minded, and your review may be colored too much by your emotions rather than being a fair assessment. However, by walking in open-minded and putting your biases aside, you will have a fairer view of what you have watched. That's not to say you are not allowed to have a bias, nor am I saying that you cannot have things you like or dislike or express your emotions in a review. The problem is when those biases and feelings color your review to the extent of judging a video unfairly and making bad points. Take Lancer for example, as he is probably most infamous for his bias against Melanie. He consistently has Melanie as a negative in whatever video she's in no matter what. He even said that she was annoying in the NFT video, where she didn't even do anything, like, at all. And that's not even going into what he says about her whenever she does do something. Sure, he liked her in the Death Row video, but that's literally it as far as I'm aware, and the way the rest of his content treats the character speaks much louder than him agreeing with one of the most universally loved videos of last year. I, on the other hand, am infamous for my hatred of Mario and Meggy having a sibling dynamic, and have consistently advocated for them to stop that and make them actual friends again. But the thing is, that's not a bias that I let color my work to an extent that is harmful to the overall quality of my review. Whenever I criticize Mario and Meggy's dynamic, I usually explain why it's a problem in the video, and it doesn't even make the entire video bad for me. The only time where Mario and Meggy's dynamic has ever ruined the entire video for me is in the awful little road trip, when that was the vast majority of the video. I am even on the record for having Mario Goes on a Diet as one of the best videos of last year, specifically because it's probably the one time I thought they worked well as a sibling dynamic. And that's not me using plausible deniability, nor am I just going with what everyone else said. This is a take I've had since before I was even on YouTube. I always make sure to keep a level head when I watch and review SMG4 videos, and I try to remove any preconceived notions I may have when I enter it and keep an open mind. Otherwise, you may end up with an unfair review with bad points that only exist because you couldn't put your bias aside for the sake of constructive criticism. You know, like that terrible review of the mustache video I mentioned earlier. But at the end of the day, perhaps the most important thing is to at least be honest with what you're saying. At the end of the day, you're still giving your honest thoughts on what you've watched and what you think can be improved. The perspective from an individual, who is speaking it as they believe it, can lead to interesting observations that may make for good feedback for the creators. Following bandwagons blindly and copy and pasting what everyone else is saying is not the way to let whoever is watching or reading to get a look into your perspective of what you are reviewing, nor does it always make for the best criticisms. A lot of people bandwagon that Mr. Puzzles being used a lot this year was bad, yet they also stay true to the claim that Desti's role and emotional impact in the anime arc was bad because she wasn't used enough prior. As a result, I have very little respect for the former criticism, as it comes across as having unreasonable standards and complaining for the sake of complaining, rather than being fair criticism. That's not to say that what other people are saying about something isn't ever correct, nor am I saying that you should only base what you're saying on your own experience. But there is a difference between just going with what everyone else is saying, and agreeing with something all on your own. Heck, maybe you even agree with what everyone else is saying but still don't think it's that big of a deal in your own opinion. I'm going to play a clip from another YouTuber I really like, from a video talking about media discourse that I shared over a month ago.
If I was to point out a plot hole or inconsistency with the rules of an established world, the way a character acts, or how powerful a character is, and nobody can come up with a good defense that debunks that criticism, then I would see this as a problem with the story that I'm criticizing. Do I think it's objectively a problem with the story that everyone has to take issue with? No, but that's kind of where I finish the point. Because what I would say is that if I point out these logical inconsistencies within a story and nobody can debunk it, then that is objectively a logical inconsistency within the story. But whether or not you see it as a problem in the story, that's where the subjective part of the media consumption comes in. People are going to have different standards for media, people are going to be impacted by a piece of media and take it more seriously than others, and be impacted differently than others. But then that leads me to another problem within media discourse that I see, whether it be in my comments or just on social media in general. So let's start off by talking about standards.
If you agree with what's being said, fair enough, but your perspective should always, at the very least, remain your own. There really isn't much more to say here. My best recommendation to you is that when you watch a video, watch it open-minded, let the art play out as you watch it, and when you get into the review, and give your honest thoughts. Don't let whatever bias you may have color your work, and stay wary of whether or not what a lot of other people are saying is truly accurate in your own opinion. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how I believe one should go about being a good SMG4 critic. In case the examples I brought up hadn't made this obvious, I felt a need to make this video because a lot of the criticism I see for SMG4 these days just doesn't come off to me as good criticism. Most of it these days is either biased as hell, unconstructive, having of inconsistent standards, or just only existing for the existence of negativity rather than to give fair criticism that may actually help the people working at SMG4. I hope that by providing what I perceive to be the qualities of a good critic, that maybe more people who wish to review SMG4 will take the right notes and make more constructive content, so that SMG4 may legitimately improve as a show. If you want to be a critic of SMG4, but don't possess the equipment nor the knowledge to create videos like myself, then I strongly recommend creating an account on Quora and joining the space, Super Meme Epic 4, an SMG4 dedicated space owned and managed by yours truly. There will be a set of small rules upon entering said space, but on the whole I intend for this space to be used for good, and to be a positive influence on the SMG4 community. If you have a desire to critique SMG4, I strongly encourage you to voice your thoughts and your reasonings for everyone to see it. We need more good critics in our community, and I strongly encourage anyone watching to take the right notes, and give it a try. This has been Super Meme Maker 5, and I will see you all next time.